Hi, and welcome to the WFM podcast. We aim to be the voice for all things workforce management related. I'm Andre, I will be your host today, and with me in this episode, Emile Anthony Nair, a workforce manager with tons of experience, loads of interesting stories, that joins us to share about the skills for workforce management, how the industry is evolving, as well as share brilliant advice in the end of this episode. Stay tuned. Emile, how are you doing? First of all,
I'm doing good. Thank you very much for the invitation, Andre, and very excited.
not a
How
problem.
about you? How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing quite well. I'm doing quite well. So thank you so much for asking. And I have to say that Emil, we have spoke a while back, probably like a few years, like 4 or 5 years. You were someone that stuck
Yeah,
with
that's
me
great.
because you have an amazing experience. I think you covered all the boxes within workforce management, work life cycle, and I'm really excited for the listeners to get to know you a bit better and for you to share your knowledge with everyone. So just to start off, where are you based in?
Oh, based currently here in Antipolo City, which is a city just outside of Manila. But again, I was born and raised here in the Philippines, but my family is based in Malaysia, in Kuala Lumpur.
Really far from where we are, and I would love to visit the Philippines. It's actually I've
The
never
other
been
side
there.
of the world,
the
almost the
other,
other side.
almost the other side. So I spoke. You have loads of experience before, but just in a brief summary, how many years have you been working in workforce management? If you can summarize your journey over these last years.
Sure. So this year, actually, 2022, I would be celebrating my 15th year in workforce management. I started my workforce management career back in 2000, October of 2007, as a real-time analyst. Most of my experience is in the BPO side of the industry, but I've had experience also working from, the client side, which is the other side of the fence.
In house.
So it started off as a real-time analyst. The good thing about my experience as a real-time analyst is that I gained a good footing of my career because they taught us the basics, the fundamentals of WFM back then. So I used the experience that I gained as a real-time analyst to, move up to a scheduler position. I think I made a good impression with my previous leaders back then, because after 6 months, I got promoted as a, people manager for the first time as a supervisor. And then eventually I worked my way up, gaining new skill sets, because each step of the ladder in the workforce management field, in our industry, there's different skill sets that you need.
Mhm.
It's a different skill set when you're an RTM as well as a scheduler, and it's also a different skill set when you're a people leader. 'Cause you need to, manage different cultures, different attitudes, different, motivations. I learned a lot. Eventually, I got an opportunity to work as an individual contributor this time as a workforce planner, which, if I may say, looking back, moved my career progression leaps and bounds because I got to work with a great leader who's based out of Australia who taught me everything I know in capacity planning and forecasting, and that really helped me a lot to be at the position where I am today, which is the workforce manager position. So dealing with the workforce manager position, basically, every day you though I'm responsible for the WFM end to end process, I do focus a lot more on the capacity planning and forecasting side because that's where a lot of the strategic conversations happen with your stakeholders. So with your operations, with your training, with your recruitment team. So it really helped me a lot establish, a good footing. Of
Mhm.
course, first in capacity planning and forecasting, but then learning also the skills required for stakeholder management, good public speaking. Also, I wasn't this confident before when I started my career, but now I could pretty much speak with anyone.
That's
Not even feeling any doubt or any anything
Yeah,
at
and
all.
that's a skill that I think when everyone starts, everyone takes that skill as a second part because the technical part is more important. But I think that
Correct.
sometimes it's as important as all the technical knowledge you get.
That's true. I actually got my start because of my technical skills.
I'm on the same page, so I totally understand that. I will pick on two things you shared before. One about that step to be a people leader, and you mentioned that was very early in your career. How threatening and how challenging that was in the beginning.
Oh, yeah, it was really scary at first because I know that I'm going to be responsible for the first time for a group of people. But before I was an individual contributor, I was only responsible for my own performance. So, good thing that I got a lot of mentoring from my leaders back then who taught me, you know, it is really important that you build that trust within your team. They trust you and you trust them to deliver, establishing the relationship not just on the work side but also on the personal side, because those personal things that's happening to your direct reports, they would have an impact on their performance. So it's really a good balance of of those things that allowed me to have a pleasant experience in terms of managing my first team. And up until today, my first team, my original group of 11 people. We're still good friends. We keep in touch every year. We have a reunion. We see each other, even though we work for different companies now. Some of them even are managers, the same as me. So, it's a good
It's a good
experience. It
sign.
was a good experience. Yeah.
And I think that touches on a subject I will go, which is back in the day, how different the work is. But just to touch on something else you mentioned, so becoming a manager, and you mentioned that you had to manage multiple cultures. I know for a fact that you are exposed to multiple cultures throughout your journey
Oh
from
yeah.
different countries like Canada, Singapore, Philippines, Malaysia. So
Hmm.
all of them have differences. I would love to touch on that on how is it to work on that side, especially when you are managing people, as well as you are supporting multiple people with so many different cultures. How challenging and how big of a development path it was to be exposed to that multicultural environment.
Well, it's a good thing that I was born in a multicultural country, because they really in here in Asia, there are nuances in terms of working with people. Let's say working with someone from China, working with someone from Japan or in Singapore. Because my when I started my career, a lot of the BPOs here in the Philippines were opened up by American companies. So people might think that my culture is lean towards Western, but really it's more. I do have a great understanding of the Eastern culture because again I'm Asian, so I do have an understanding on that. So here in Asia, it's a lot more. So like let me give you an example. If for example you're in a meeting with someone from those different countries that I've mentioned, it is really important that when you're in a meeting, you ask them, you give them time to speak, because if you go through the meeting, you talk about the things that you need to talk about, and then you don't give them an opportunity, and you just ask them, "Are you guys okay with this?" They would just say okay, even though really they do have something to say about the thing that you just mentioned during your presentation. So it's really important to give them the opportunity to speak. That's number one. And you don't try to dominate everyone during the conversation. It's really a collaborative effort when you have those meetings here in Asia. So everybody, you need to give everybody their chance to say their piece. That's one of the differences. And also, it's a lot more personal here when you work with your stakeholders. So you don't just have that business relationship with them. You have that when's their birthday, when's their kid's birthday, when's their wife's birthday. So it's basically knowing them on a personal level too, because after work, there you do tend to spend some time with your workmates as well here. Not just it's pretty much the same experience that I've had in Canada, because in Toronto it's also a melting pot. There's a lot. I've worked with a lot of actually there's the company that I work for that's based in Toronto. It's a fairly small company. It's a consulting company. So there were a number of us Asians there that's also working. So it wasn't really a big adjustment for me per se because I was recruited by my former boss to work for that consulting company. So I already know who am I, who are the top two people that I'm going to be working with, and then the rest of the team, they're pretty much, we grew up on the same culture. So
Yeah, it made it easier to adapt
correct.
and adjust. If you could go back in time, how different was the job back in the day?
Oh man, it's a lot more manual back in the day. I used to remember when I started my WFM career. I used Excel back in college because I studied computer science. But I don't use it a lot. And then when I first encountered Excel again after college and after working as an agent, I got my start in the industry working as a technical support agent. So when I when I encountered Excel again and how the folks in my team are using it back then when I was an RTM, I was like, really? This is how capable this tool is. So, but
It's not
you know,
only a blank spreadsheet.
it's not only a blank spreadsheet. You don't just do addition, subtraction. It's there's a lot of things that you can do. There's a lot of data manipulation stuff that you can do, and those things that I had to learn quickly. I learned a lot by looking at what my teammates are doing. Of course, you need to study yourself as well. I got to a point wherein I'm not using my mouse when I was, working on spreadsheet. I was just using the keyboard shortcuts. That was back then, but back then the most popular tool outside of Excel that was being used in the Philippines was CMS. I don't know if you're familiar with CMS,
I
but
am.
now there's a lot more players now, and the data that they provide is a lot more. I don't know, I forgot the term, but it's a lot more tailor fit. So you don't really have like in CMS, you don't really have the flexibility to play around with the data. It's basically now when you extract a report, the service level is already calculated, the HTs are already calculated, everything's already done by the system for you. Back then, it's everything you need to start everything from scratch and then make it easier for you in the future
You
to
touched
use
the
it.
point that I recall, like, and I think most people that are listening that are not that old or didn't start in this career before, like, they don't understand how what's the luxury of having those metrics pre-calculated and available.
Oh, yeah.
Well, before you had to restart every single time from scratch, you're like, am I calculating this correctly? And you
Yeah.
had like to rerun it like for an hour just to be sure.
The funny thing is that up until now you have that level of distrust in the tool, right? Where
Yeah,
you still want to know how it calculates everything. Unlike because before you do know how it calculates everything because you were the one who set up that calculation when you created the template. Now you have your doubts. Especially when I don't know if uh, because we initially used just an Excel spreadsheet to plan for everything back then.
I think in the end of the day was a very exciting time to start.
Oh yes, it was definitely, and I always tell my team that it is important that you have a background on just the bare basics. Not you're not reliant on tools heavily on tools because softwares do make mistakes. Don't get me wrong, guys. There's a lot of bugs out there. So you have to be aware of how things are being calculated in the background. So if you see a number, you have to know that is this calculation correct? So
we spoke about how it was back for you, but I wanted to like you have a team, you manage the team across like these years, multiple teams, I have to say. What are the skills that you feel like were at the time the most important skills? And we both of us we spoke that we started with that professional technical skills were the more
mhm.
important. And what are the skills that you feel like today are more important to start in this career?
Well, back then, if you're let me just establish first, if you're really
Hmm.
going to start hiring someone from zero experience, I think the important skills, well, the important non-tangibles actually, it's not really skills, but for me, when I'm hiring someone with zero WFM background, The most important thing for me are the non-tangibles, like you know, uh, your professionalism, your maturity, how well do you handle pressure. If I'm hiring someone with zero experience, those are the things that I look for in an applicant. Because all of this, the skill stuff, same as with me 15 years ago, I learned them while I was performing the job. So at least they have experience using a spreadsheet. That's already a check for me. And they know some basic formulas. They did their research with WFM. But if I interview someone that has zero workforce management experience, I usually focus on the non tangible stuff, right? Non tangible things before over technical skills, because technical skills can be learned. And it's the same when I was interviewing back then for my original team, and also when I am interviewing today. Those are the same things that I look for. Those are the non-negotiables, basically, for me. But in terms of interviewing someone with WFM experience, back then, I guess the main difference right now is back then I don't really look at if they have experience using a workforce management suite. It's not as important back then as it is today. Um, Mainly because of the learning curve. So if you hire someone with zero experience, with workforce experience, but has not used a workforce management tool before, then there's going to be a learning curve. You're going to have to spend time, teaching that person. So it's going to be a lot longer learning curve as compared to someone with, an experience with any workforce management tool, because basically every workforce management tool is the same. The process is the same. So
Mhm.
the learning curve would be much faster for someone with tools experience. And
Most tools are
uh,
designed to solve the same problem in the end of the day.
correct. And the process, the steps are basically the same. And then one thing that I'm also looking for right now, especially for more senior WFM positions, is experience in data analytics, data management. I myself is currently I'm going through a business intelligence manager course through a scholarship that was granted by our government here in partnership with Coursera. So I've been taking up that course for the past 6 months. And then at the end of the course, I would be basically getting a certification for a data analytics manager. So data analytics is the future for me, I believe, for not just for WFM. It's also the future of a lot of other industries. So to keep in pace with
Mhm.
the future, of course, futures WFM personnel right now needs to have, or at least have experience or background in data analytics. Though we do have, but really when I went through the course, it's a lot more structured, it's a lot more organized, and you get to know the terms that's being used in the industry.
And I agree with you, and I think WFM in the end of the day, it's sitting in a position where it's a mix of other expertise. Like we need to know a bit of HR, we need to know a bit of
Correct.
data analytics. We kind of learn now if in terms of finance to understand how different decisions impact our financials. So totally agree with you, and it was great to see your perspective on that as well. Just to touch on something you mentioned before, so you are of course very knowledgeable of the BPO industry, especially in where you are based in Southeast Asia. I would love to know a bit more about how the evolution of the BPO industry happened over the last 5-10 years, because I'm expecting that clients started demanding for different things, like as they close deals and look at partnerships, probably what they used to look for 10-15 years ago is completely different from what they are looking for today. Can you let us know how do you see that difference in that evolution in the expectation from clients in the BPO industry?
Yeah, when I first started in the industry back in 2005, almost all of the offerings, the job offerings in the market were for voice positions. Voice was the only offering that was available then, and then eventually chat came into play, and then now we have a lot of multi-skilled offerings like chat and back office, or even all three: voice, chat, and email. The difference that I see right now that's happening in the industry is that um, back then it's a lot more cost per call or revenue per call models. Now you see a lot of models wherein it's productive hours or FTE based, which is I think is I'm not sure what drove it, but a lot of the contracts that I work on as of recent are more FTE based. So the clients are basically paying for the person for the day, including everything, including their breaks sometimes even. So that's a big difference that I've seen, and culturally, it also translated into the way that we do workforce management, primarily the way that we do our scheduling wherein we look at the human factor now, and I think that's also when we started seeing some of those new billing models, like the FTEs, the productive hours, wherein since you're not fighting over ensuring that your agent gets the most transactions completed in a day, then you have a lot more flexibility in terms of allowing them to get that work life balance. So that's when I was already working in WFM when I started to see that shift. And folks were now given consecutive rest days. Like before, when I was an agent, I wasn't getting, you know, if you're getting consecutive rest days, then it means that your team is performing well. But then now, there's a huge that was the shift back in 2010. We had to work with our stakeholders to understand what's, to help them understand what the impact is to the business, and then eventually set up the meeting with the client, and they're more open to it back then in 2010 compared to when I started in 2005 and when I started in WFM in 2007. So back then, when you're a student, your school schedule needs to work around your work schedule. Now it's, if you're a student, you get preferential schedule. You can even choose your day off.
Just to move more on your personal development and what got you here. So, like, I think everyone knows the amount of experience you have. And you mentioned someone before that was very impactful in your journey, that was influential to you and kind of like set the stage for you as you were growing. I wanted to kind of like ask, for you to share, if across that journey, if that was the most influential person to you or not. But I would love to, like, could you share a story of what was the impact that that person or someone else had on you to become who you are today?
Oh, yeah, certainly. I always love to talk about this person, especially with my direct reports now when I'm sharing my story and how I got my start in, well, not specifically in workforce management, but again in capacity planning and forecasting. So coming into his team back in 2014, I was managing a team previously of capacity planners and schedulers. But then, the capacity planning and scheduling that we're doing is already, it's already boxed. It's already, basically the process is already set up. So all I needed to know was how the process went. What are the things that we need to achieve week on week, and that's basically it. So I didn't really have a lot of background back then in terms of what's the flow of capacity planning and forecasting. So I joined his team, and from day one, he was right there behind me, walking me through the process. So what he did first was he asked one of the senior members of the team to work with me in terms of learning the templates that we're using to establish our capacity planning and forecasting. So after getting my onboarding in terms of the tools that we use, those Excel spreadsheets, every step of the way, because he assigned me to the two of the biggest accounts that we have based in Manila. So it was really important that there wasn't any interruption in the business side of things. So he was there with me all throughout this my onboarding phase. The first 2-3 months that I was working with him, I learned a lot of the skills that I'm using right now in those first 2 to 3 months with him. It was like how you manage your stakeholders. Those skills that I didn't have before because I didn't have face to face time with a client directly before. It was done by either my manager or someone from our client services team. But my experience back then is that I have regular face to face time with the client, and then I was the one responsible for creating the forecast for that client. So him helping me throughout that process, helping me learn the step by step process. Basically, him being very organized in terms of the training that I received when I joined his team was really a game changer for me. I would say that, despite having other leaders that are as, caring as he is, that 2 years that we worked together was really, helped me pushed my career leaps and bounds. And up until today, I'm very grateful for that.
And if you look at your beginning of your career, and the knowledge you have today, if you could be on that same spot of advising someone, what would be the one thing you wish you had known before, or on the beginning of your career, that you can now share as advice to our listeners?
If I knew early on back then that I need to work on my communication, it would have been a much easier process for me. It's really that stakeholder management part. If you get to learn that early on in your career, then it would really help open a lot of doors for you. But in order for you to have the opportunity to practice it, you need to be at a certain level of skills as well, because some stakeholders, they only trust certain people. And like, I understand how difficult it would be for someone who's like an RTA to necessarily have the opportunity to learn those skills. But uh, being learning everything that's required for you to perform your duties, basically you would get noticed by your stakeholders that you're a person that they can trust in terms of this side of the business. So I guess learning, knowing that from if I knew that I needed to learn that quickly before, I would have, it would have
Would fast
accelerated my
track
career. Yeah, it
fast
would
track
fast
your
track my
process.
career. Yes, that's right. Right. And I always go by the motto that I learned from one of my previous leaders as well is, fail fast. Don't be afraid to fail. Failing is a part of your learning experience. So failing fast would allow you to recover faster, right? So it's not that you I'm not saying that you make those big mistakes, but it's given that you would make mistakes. You don't take it too hard. Mistakes are part of life. The most important thing is that you learn from those mistakes and you don't repeat those mistakes, right? That's how I learned. That's how I was taught to look at it early on. So having that mindset really helped me, like, not afraid of making mistakes, but more of, I've made a lot of mistakes. So at this point in my career, I already know what to avoid. And I think to help the next generation really move forward is that um, you do need to spend some time, some of your personal time, maybe 1 or 2 hours per week, to read about something new in not just in workforce management, but in the industry overall. Like, I myself spend 3 hours every weekend going through that data data manager course that I'm going through for the past 6 months now, and it's been a game changer, really. So if I am at this point in my career still learning new things in my field, the more important it is for those that are just starting off their workforce management career to, really spend more time in basically improving themselves, improving their skill set. So those are the advice that I could give the younger generation, I guess, to focus on your personal development, and also don't be afraid to make those mistakes. It's it's really part of life.
Just to wrap up, and I really like your advice about failing as soon as you can. You will learn from your failures, so not be afraid to fail. I think that's a tremendous advice for everyone out there, because that's kind of like the way everyone learns. Is like how you evolve. Is like being exposed to whatever mistakes you can, and learn from it. So definitely great advice. Emil, we're out of time, but a huge thanks for setting aside some time
Oh
today
yeah.
to be a guest on our podcast. It was a pleasure to have you here and speaking with you. Any final words before we close?
Oh yeah, I would like to thank you as well. I know you've been trying to lock this time for a while. There's a lot of things that happened here in between then and now. So I really thank you for this opportunity as well to be considered as an expert in the industry. To be honest with you, I'm really happy to have this opportunity to get to showcase my experience and my background in workforce management. So thank you,
Thank you, sir.
Andre, and to Gonzalo, to for helping me get this set up.
No, no problem. Thank you so much. I think amazing insights, thoughts, and knowledge, and for sure you are definitely an expert in this industry. Thank you so much, Emil. Have a
Thank
great
you
day.
as well. You too.
Thank you for listening to WFM. This podcast is made and produced by André Leitão, Bilge Hentolun, Doug Carsteton, Gonçalo Gomes, and Kim Paz. If you like this show, don't forget to share it with your friends and colleagues. Visit our website, wwfm.com, to find more exclusive interviews and WFM content. See you next time. All rights reserved.